My name is Shawn Coss, and I welcome you to my YouTube channel. This episode is going to be a little bit different. I've looked back at the previous episodes I've put out and realized it's more of just kind of like a time lapse. I kind of talk about where my head's at when I was doing it, but I don't really talk about the process of how I go from the inspiration to the idea to the final product. So midway through starting this drawing, I had that weird epiphany of maybe people want to know where I come up with the idea as opposed to just watching me time lapse through it. And so with this episode for Other Mother from Coraline, I'm going to try my best and walk you through the process of how I design a piece and where I come up with the concepts. So buckle in, first rough draft at it, let's go. So first is the idea. A while back I did my own version of the Coraline character, and I had many people ask if I would do any more of the characters. And so we went back to the film and started looking at different concepts and different scenes that really stuck out to me. And obviously the Other Mother just has this dark, comforting but also unsettling appearance. And if you've seen the ending, spoiler alert, she does turn into a very creepy spider monster that is right up my alley. And so if you haven't seen the movie, I'd definitely check it out. The next step I typically do is I research, especially if it's a character that isn't my own IP or my own creation. I want to get in as many ideas and many variations as possible. And so I'll typically go on Google, Pinterest, Instagram, in the basement, and try and find just various concepts. I also like to see what other artists have done and just find that inspiration hidden within. And so I pull up a lot of the still shots from the film and try to find, I guess, the overall structure of the character, because I'm not going to copy the same pose or the same style, but I want to have an idea of all the pieces and parts that make up this creature. And as you see here, I'm kind of going through the finale scene of where she turns into like a little spidery creature, and that's where I get a lot of the idea from for this piece. The sketch. So we always start out on the sketch. Now, note to the viewers, I started sketching this before I realized I was going to make a film about it. So right now you're watching the Procreate time-lapse version of the initial sketch. You can see the two concepts that I am basing it off of, not concepts, references. One from the film, and then another is a figure made by another artist to kind of give me a full body figure. I always start out in red. My one buddy asked me, why do artists always draw in red or blue? And I never really knew why I did, but a lot of artists, especially old school artists, did it because when you scanned in the artwork, the blue and the red wouldn't show up in the final scan. So you could set up the contrast, you know, brighten it up, and then those colors will disappear. So you just have the black line work. So that's why we draw in reds and blues. Now, I personally always start out with the face. We're naturally drawn towards faces, eyes, nose, mouth, whatever figure, like whatever creates a face. You know, we're just naturally drawn to that as humans. And so if you can nail the face first, it kind of helps set the mood and the tone for the rest of the piece. Obviously, one of the most iconic parts of the other side in Coraline is the button eyes, and just everything's a little unsettled. And so I wanted to give it that, I guess, creepy look to it, stay somewhat true to the original film, but then add my own technique. I keep looking back and forth at the reference to make sure I'm getting the parts correct. Now, her dress was probably the most difficult because I couldn't get a great shot of it. So I had to kind of figure it out and then make up some parts. Like, I know I wanted to have a little bit more symmetrical top side to it. So it has this weird like double horned edges. And here I'm just constantly going in and out, back and forth, zooming in and zooming out of the image to kind of take in the whole picture and then also get in real close with all the details. I love drawing fine lines, but at the same time I regret doing it because I've become known for that. Now here I'm actually sketching out the spine over top of the sketch of the spine. So the red sketch lines are typically very rough drafts and everything, and then I'll typically do another line sketch over top of it with black, and then edit over top of that. Layers upon layers. I also like working in negatives, where I'll fill in a whole section of black and then start erasing parts out of it. I don't know when I started doing that, but sometimes it's better to take away than to add to kind of give it that effect. And here, once again, we're just drawing more and more lines because this is the bed I made, and it's a line bed, a bed of lines, and I have to sleep in it. Now, another thing I do is I work in separate layers. So when I finish a certain piece, like the head, I'll put that on one layer and I'll move to the next layer. Because if I screw up the next part, I can just erase it and not ruin the previous piece. And I'll do that through the whole sketch and through the whole drawing processes. As I break it down, you know, we have the head, the top torso, the bottom torso, the dress, the legs, and the arms. So I have them all broken up into pieces. And as I finish each piece, I move on to the next part on a different layer. Now, this might be my favorite part, is drawing the spider legs, because I love drawing drapery. Any type of folds, any type of fabric, I absolutely love doing. I'm not the best at it by any means, but I love just folds. I love it, absolutely love it. I didn't want to just do a 2D figure, so I have some of the legs coming forward a little bit closer and hiding some of the parts from behind to kind of give it that depth. Now here you can see the folds as I've drawn them in. And I'm starting to add in all the line work. I use some custom ink brushes that allow me to give this nice textured, like traditional ink look. And if you look at the bottom, you see all the tattered threads and everything like that. That's done purely through taking away and adding to with the blacks and the eraser. And a lot of it's just pure randomness. I've been doing this for so long that I don't really think about it as I do it. I just keep adding and taking away, adding and taking away, and it's usually about a 30-second to a minute process. And I can do it fairly quickly, but I've been doing it for so long. I tell artists all the time that if you keep practicing at something, it becomes second nature to you. And so if you're not great at folds, or you're not great at making those tattered rags, if you keep doing it over and over again to where it's no longer difficult for you, then it just becomes second nature. And I promise you, if you stick with it long enough, you'll get better at it and you won't even think about it, to where you'll just say tattered rags is your difficult subject matter. If you do that for a couple weeks straight, I guarantee within a month or two, you're gonna find it easier and easier, and then in a year, you're not even gonna think about it. You'll just erase, add, and you'll have some tattered rags like I do. Adaptation. So, artists need to be able to adapt and to adjust as needed. And I just wasn't happy with how the face looked. It just didn't have the same creepiness to it. And so I took the head, doubled or tripled its size to kind of make it a little bit more in your face, and then adjusted the smile because I wanted it a little bit more creepier, a little bit more otherworldly, to where it looks like it can't really exist in her world. And you can see I'm kind of toying with ideas and sketches. Still not happy with a lot of them, but this part here is, you know, I just wasn't feeling the original head design. And so I just decided, okay, I'm gonna erase it and I'm gonna just add more. And then I thought, well, why does the smile have to be attached to her face? You know, this is kind of this other plane, this other universe, this other reality, so let's just get a little weird with it. And so we went a much longer smile that goes off her face, almost like it's floating on top of her face. And I wanted to get a little bit more creepier teeth, and it just looked better to me. It looked more like my style. You know, when you're doing fan art, you're doing pieces that are already IP of other creators, you don't want to copy exactly how they look. And so I wanted to give it my own flair, my own touch. Now with the flat color, This is a very traditional kind of comic book style. I use a separate layer underneath all the ink work, and I just lay out flat. Kind of the rough idea of where I want the color to be. And I'll adjust it as I can, but it allows me to change the color on the fly without affecting anything else. As you can see here, these are my different layers. This is my texture for the dress. I use the one diamond that I copied over and over and over again. Took a little bit longer than it should have. And then I use the warp tool to kind of help fold it into the clothing to make it look like it goes with the clothing, so to speak. So you can kind of see how I use this warp tool. I kind of bend it to its, to kind of fit the outfit. And I actually do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times, different parts of the body. So I copy and paste this over and over again and kind of just keep adjusting it. Then I'll erase everything on the outside. There's actually an easier way to do this. You can mask it out, but I didn't. And then I toy a lot with layer effects. I try to find the layer that helps blend it in the best to where I don't want those to be too in your face color wise. And so with this one, I went with the hard light, kind of help blend it in. And then I use the layer masks to go over top of the flat colors. So you can kind of see, I'll take a color and then I'll start adding it on. I usually will take a base color and then I'll go a couple shades lighter for the highlights, and then I'll do a couple shades darker for the shadow. And a lot of my artwork is typically just three shades, highlight, mid-tone, shadow, typically. And when I tell people with shadows and light sources, you need a solid light source for sure, but when you're drawing your shadows and your highlights, they don't need to be 100% accurate. It's better to make them look cool, as long as they're still within the range of this is where the light hits, but it's better to look cool looking than just plain looking shadows. You can add character to those shadows. And then you can see my shadows I do on the skin color. So a lot of times I'll use, again, this comes from just knowledge. I'll use purples a lot for my shadows because it's a cooler color. And then I'll toy with it with the layer effects to kind of get the color exactly the way I want it. But you can see that purple turns to this nice navy blue shadow. And then here I'm just adding a little bit of effects, little hints of color here and there. And I'm very messy with my color. I don't spend a lot of time with it. It's a lot of block shading, and then I kind of just throw it on there willy-nilly. I use the word willy-nilly, I did. But here I'm using just a little bit of the shadow to kind of add a little bit more texture here and there, putting lines, to kind of give it the folds and creases in the skin. Would you call that skin, or is it a carapace? Maybe it's a carapace because she is very spidery at this point. So here, I'm adding the clipping mask, and then this is where I add just a little bit more effects. I love using these watercolor ones, and I'll just throw in these little colors here and there. And again, I'll toy around with where they go. And I'll just play with the effects to kind of get the effects I want with it. But those little watercolors just add just a little bit more effect to it. A little bit worn and torn fabric. And so here I'm just going through the layers and just seeing which effect do I like the most. Then, play with the opacity, but it just gives it a little bit more dirtiness and a little grittiness. Here I'm just getting a little crazier with it, just throwing it everywhere, because fuck it, right? Again, this comes with just time and just putting stuff down and knowing it's gonna look okay. Or maybe I'm delusional and I think it looks good and you guys are all like, this is god awful. I mean, that could totally be happening right now. I don't know what YouTube viewers are thinking. I'm not a mind reader. But yeah, you're just getting all the details of how I do this and all my layer effects. But see, it just builds it up and up. As you can see, it fills in the diamond textures as well. Here I'm just like toying with different ones. I have a couple different brushes I use. I end up not liking some of them. The final touches are kind of my favorite, like adding the cherry on top of the cake. Cherry on a cake? Whipped cream on a cake? Candles on a cake? I don't know. But I like to add just a little bit of details here and there that just gives it my kind of, I don't want to say iconic style because that sounds very egotistical. I guess like just, you know it's mine. You know it's my work. And so I add these things here and there that are just, you know, a keystone of what people know me for. So the drips, the weird stringy stuff that's coming off. It just adds just a little bit more. And I could have been done already. I could have been done with this piece way before I did this, but I like drippiness. I think everything should have some drips on it. Unless it's your private area, then you should probably go see a doctor. I hope this helped a little bit and gave you a little bit of insight on how I go about creating designs and the process of it. The process isn't always the same, but for the most part, this is how it goes when I'm working with IPs that are already out there in the wild. But I hope you liked it. If you liked this video and you want to see more, or you want to see a specific video, I would love for you to leave a comment below on what you'd want to see in terms of like if it's tutorials, if it's how I draw certain things, lighting, color, textures. I'm open to do anything. I want this channel to kind of grow and help other artists grow too. So I appreciate you watching this. I appreciate you still supporting me after all this time. This is a lot of fun. I do apologize it took me so long to get this one, but I had to actually sit down and think about how I was going to talk about it. So enjoy.